Police mocked her thinking she was ordinary, but they made a big mistake. Story time Part 2. Maya lived in a quiet town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and the streets seemed to move at their own slow pace. Life there was simple, predictable, and safe, or at least, that's what everyone thought. Maya herself seemed to fit perfectly into this ordinary rhythm. She had a small apartment on the edge of town, where the mornings were filled with the scent of fresh bread from the bakery below, and evenings were quiet, broken only by the soft hum of streetlights turning on. She worked at the local library, a small building tucked between a cafe and a stationery shop, where the smell of old books mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the cafe next door. At first glance, Maya seemed like anyone else. She dressed plainly, usually in jeans and sweaters, and spoke softly. She didn't have a flashy phone, a fancy car, or any social media presence. People often overlooked her, seeing her as someone who was just part of the scenery. But Maya had something unusual, a mind that noticed everything, a memory that remembered small details others missed, and a calmness that never wavered, even when situations seemed tense. Her mornings were routine, but she enjoyed them. She would walk to work along the same narrow sidewalks, greet Mr. Patel, the baker, who always had a fresh loaf ready, and wave to Mrs. Singh, who sold flowers near the bus stop. Children playing in the park would sometimes run past, calling out her name, and she would smile, even though she never joined their games. These simple interactions gave her a quiet joy, though she kept her deeper thoughts to herself. One particular morning, as she walked past the town square, something felt slightly off. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else. A man in a dark jacket kept glancing at the jewelry store window with an intensity that didn't seem casual. Maya paused, pretending to tie her shoelace, and watched him for a few moments. Something about the way he shifted his weight and kept looking around suggested he was up to no good. Most people would have ignored it, thinking he was just a curious passerby. But Maya's instincts told her otherwise. The day at the library went by as usual. Maya helped people find books, organized the shelves, and assisted children with their reading programs. She liked seeing the excitement on young faces when they discovered a story that captivated them. Books were her world, a place where she could observe human nature, understand emotions, and imagine situations beyond her own life. While reshelving a stack of mystery novels, Maya's thoughts kept returning to the man she had seen earlier. Something about him didn't sit right. She tried to convince herself she was overthinking, but a small, persistent voice inside kept warning her that danger might be near. Still, she didn't say anything to anyone. Who would believe her? She was just the quiet girl from the library, the one who spent her days reading and helping others, not someone who solved crimes. That afternoon, the town was shaken by shocking news. A robbery had occurred at the jewelry store in the square. The police arrived quickly, cordoning off the area and questioning everyone nearby. Crowds gathered, whispering and speculating about what had happened. Maya watched from a distance, her heart pounding. The details she had noticed earlier suddenly made sense: the man in the dark jacket, the way he had lingered, the nervous glances. She knew she had seen something important. Gathering her courage, Maya approached the police officers and described what she had observed. She spoke clearly, recounting the man's behavior, the time she had seen him, and the direction he had gone after leaving the area. But instead of listening, the officers laughed. One of them even smirked and said, "And you are?" Maya felt a flicker of frustration but didn't let it show. The police continued, joking among themselves, making comments about how someone ordinary like her could possibly know anything about a serious crime. They didn't even jot down her observations. The crowd around her murmured in agreement with the officers, assuming that Maya was just being imaginative, that she had nothing useful to contribute. Despite the mockery, Maya didn't walk away. She stayed on the edges of the crowd, watching the officers scramble and search for clues. It was clear they were missing key details, ignoring small but significant evidence that might lead to the robber. She felt a mixture of determination and quiet anger. They had underestimated her because she didn't look dangerous or remarkable, and that was their mistake. After the initial chaos died down, Maya returned to the library, pretending to continue her normal day. But her mind was racing. She began to think like a detective, analyzing the robbery from every angle. She remembered seeing a pattern: the man had lingered near a specific window, glanced repeatedly at the security cameras, and timed his movements carefully. These were details the police had missed, but to Maya, they were clues that could solve the case. Over the next few days, she carefully observed the town. She paid attention to unusual movements, strange behaviors, and inconsistencies in people's stories. She documented her findings in a small notebook she carried everywhere, jotting down names, times, and observations. Each entry was precise, capturing details that might seem trivial but could prove crucial. Meanwhile, the police were still baffled. They questioned witnesses, followed leads, and examined the crime scene, but their progress was slow. They had dismissed Maya's account, and in doing so, they had overlooked the sharp mind that had already begun piecing together the puzzle. The more they mocked her, the more determined she became. Maya knew that being underestimated was an advantage. People let their guard down around her, thinking she was harmless. She realized that she could move unnoticed, observe without interference, and gather information the way the police never could. She didn't want recognition or praise. Her goal was simple: to uncover the truth and ensure that justice was served. As she continued her quiet investigation, Maya began noticing small patterns that others ignored. She saw the same man in different parts of town, always acting slightly out of place, always watching, always calculating. She compared his movements with reports of robberies in nearby towns and discovered a link. Her intuition told her that this was not an isolated incident, that the man might be part of something bigger. At home, she reviewed her notes and planned her next steps carefully. Maya wasn't reckless, she knew she had to be methodical. She mapped out the town, highlighted areas of interest, and predicted where the suspect might strike next. Every piece of information was a thread in a larger tapestry that she could see forming clearly in her mind. Maya's ordinary life continued outwardly the same. She went to work, helped children find books, and greeted neighbors with a smile. But behind that calm exterior, she was becoming someone entirely different: a sharp observer, a quiet strategist, and a mind that refused to be ignored. The police thought she was just a background character in the town's story, someone to mock and dismiss. Little did they know, Maya was about to prove them spectacularly wrong. By the end of that week, Maya had a plan. She would continue to gather information, connect the dots, and, when the time was right, reveal what she knew. But she also understood one crucial truth: she had to be patient. Brash action could alert the suspect and ruin everything. So she moved carefully, watched intently, and waited for the right moment to turn her quiet observations into decisive action. And so, in the small town that everyone thought they knew, an ordinary young woman was quietly becoming extraordinary. No one could guess what she was capable of. No one saw the sharp mind behind her gentle smile. And most importantly, the police, who mocked her, had made the first of many mistakes that would soon cost them dearly. Maya had always been careful and observant, but the events of the robbery had awakened something inside her. She realized that the police, who were supposed to be the protectors of the town, were dismissing her insights simply because she appeared ordinary. That morning, when she had tried to share what she saw, they laughed and made jokes. They didn't notice the sharpness in her eyes, the way her mind was already piecing together patterns that they had overlooked. She returned to her daily routine at the library, pretending that everything was normal. But her thoughts were far from ordinary. While helping children pick books or arranging shelves, she couldn't stop thinking about the robbery. The image of the man in the dark jacket kept returning to her mind. There was something precise in the way he moved, something calculated. He wasn't acting randomly, he had a plan, and he might strike again. The police were patrolling the streets, questioning people and taking statements, but their efforts seemed scattered. They were busy following leads that went nowhere, and every so often, Maya would hear their mocking laughter as they recalled her attempt to help. "She thinks she saw something important," one officer said with a smirk to another. What would a librarian know about criminals? Maya didn't let the mockery discourage her. Instead, it strengthened her resolve. She realized that she couldn't rely on the police to stop this criminal. If she wanted the town to be safe, she would have to act on her own. And so, she began her quiet investigation, careful not to attract attention, careful not to let anyone suspect that she was more capable than they imagined. She started by visiting the crime scene again, this time pretending to be just a curious passerby. She noted every detail the police seemed to overlook: a small scratch on the window frame, a faint footprint partially hidden in the dirt, and the position of a chair that had been moved during the robbery. These were small clues, almost invisible to anyone not paying attention, but to Maya, they were pieces of a puzzle that she was determined to solve. Next, she retraced the route the suspect had taken after leaving the jewelry store. She walked slowly, observing the shops, the alleys, and the small corners where someone could hide. She memorized patterns: the times when people passed certain areas, the places where someone could quickly disappear. It was meticulous work, and every detail mattered. Maya understood that catching a criminal wasn't about luck, it was about noticing what others ignored. Over the next few days, she kept a careful record in a small notebook she carried everywhere. She wrote down the time she saw unusual people, their appearance, their behavior, and any suspicious activity. She noted conversations she overheard in cafes and on the streets, always listening with an attentive ear. To anyone passing by, she seemed like the same quiet librarian, but behind her calm exterior, her mind was racing. One afternoon, Maya noticed the man in the dark jacket again. He was walking near the market, looking around as if checking for something or someone. She followed him at a distance, making sure to remain unseen. She observed how he interacted with others, the way he paused near a particular alley, and how he seemed to calculate every step. It was clear to her that he was planning something, and it might happen very soon. Maya's observations were careful and precise. She never approached the man directly, never let him see her. She knew that if he noticed her, he would change his behavior, and she would lose the advantage she had gained. Every movement was deliberate, every glance was measured. Slowly, she started to see a pattern emerge. The man wasn't acting alone. There were small signs that suggested others were involved, perhaps hiding in plain sight, blending with the crowd. Meanwhile, the police were still skeptical. They continued to mock her, sharing jokes about how someone so ordinary thought she could help solve a crime. "Maybe she's reading too many mystery novels," one officer whispered to another. They didn't realize that their laughter was actually helping her. While they underestimated her, she moved freely, gathering information without interference. Maya also started talking discreetly to people in the town. She asked subtle questions, never revealing too much about her suspicions. She spoke to shopkeepers, delivery workers, and even the street cleaner who passed her apartment every morning. Each conversation gave her a tiny piece of the larger puzzle. Some details seemed insignificant, but she stored them all in her mind, knowing that one day, they would fit together perfectly. Her determination was fueled not by pride, but by a sense of responsibility. Maya had always believed that protecting her town wasn't just the job of the police, it was the duty of everyone who cared about it. She couldn't stand by while the authorities laughed at her and ignored the truth. If the police failed, she would ensure that the criminals didn't succeed. As days passed, Maya began noticing patterns in the robberies. Certain shops were targeted at specific times, the suspect avoided cameras in a clever way, and messages seemed to pass between people in subtle gestures. All of this information was invisible to the casual observer, invisible to the police who relied on routine procedures. But Maya saw the connections. She began to sketch maps, mark routes, and predict where the next robbery might take place. One evening, as she reviewed her notes, Maya realized she had enough information to anticipate the suspect's next move. The evidence was not concrete enough to present to the police, who had already dismissed her, but it was enough for her to act quietly. She understood the risks, yet she knew that inaction could allow the criminals to strike again. Maya planned carefully. She would not confront the suspect directly, she didn't want to put herself or anyone else in immediate danger. Instead, she would use her knowledge to set up a situation where the criminals could be exposed, where their mistakes would be revealed naturally. It was a delicate plan, requiring patience, observation, and clever thinking qualities that she had in abundance. Throughout this time, she maintained her ordinary appearance. To the townspeople, she was still the quiet librarian, the gentle woman who helped children pick out books and smiled politely at everyone. Nobody suspected that behind those calm eyes, a storm of intelligence and determination was brewing. Maya had learned to blend in, to move unnoticed, and to turn people's assumptions about her into an advantage. Even when the police continued to mock her, she remained composed. Their laughter no longer frustrated her, it only reinforced her awareness that she was underestimated. In their eyes, she was invisible, incapable, and ordinary. In reality, she was observant, strategic, and far more capable than anyone imagined. Their mistake was clear, they had judged her by appearance rather than ability. One morning, Maya noticed subtle signs that the suspect's plan was unfolding. A delivery truck parked unusually, a shadow lingered near a back alley, and a familiar figure moved cautiously near a jewelry store she had been monitoring. Everything aligned with the pattern she had predicted. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with quiet anticipation. She was ready. She made mental notes, marking positions and timing movements, ensuring that she had a clear understanding of the sequence of events. Every detail mattered. Maya knew that even the smallest mistake on her part could allow the criminals to escape. But she also knew that her preparation, patience, and careful observation had brought her to this point. By evening, Maya had positioned herself in a way that gave her the best vantage point without being seen. From there, she could watch the movements, record patterns, and anticipate the next step. The town was quiet, unaware that someone ordinary had become extraordinary, silently waiting for the moment when the truth would be revealed. That night, as the street lights glowed softly and the town settled into sleep, Maya reflected on what she had learned. She understood something important: intelligence and courage were not always visible. People often judged others based on appearance, overlooking the abilities that lay beneath. She also realized that sometimes, the quietest people were the ones who could make the biggest difference. And so, while the police continued their investigation, mocking and underestimating her, Maya prepared for what was to come. The ordinary librarian had become a keen observer, a strategist, and a silent protector of her town. The next phase of her journey was about to begin, and the mistake the police had made mocking someone they thought was ordinary was about to have serious consequences for them. Maya was ready, and she knew one thing for certain: appearances were deceiving, and she was living proof. Maya had been observing the town quietly for days, her mind constantly piecing together the puzzle that the police refused to see. Every movement, every gesture, every seemingly ordinary action she noticed was part of a bigger picture. She knew the man in the dark jacket was not acting alone, and she was certain that something important was about to happen. Her patience, careful observation, and sharp mind were about to pay off. One afternoon, while Maya walked through the market, she noticed a small shop she had never paid much attention to before. It was tucked between two larger stores, almost invisible to casual passers-by. The sign above the door was old and faded, and the windows were covered with dusty curtains. Most people wouldn't have given it a second thought, but Maya had an instinct, a small, persistent feeling that told her to look closer. She paused outside, pretending to tie her shoelace, and peeked through the corner of the window. Inside, she saw the man she had been tracking. He was talking to another person she hadn't seen before, handing over what appeared to be a package. The conversation was short, but Maya caught enough to understand that they were planning something. Her heart raced, but she remained calm, knowing that revealing herself too soon could ruin everything. Maya quickly retreated to a nearby cafe, where she could observe without being noticed. She ordered a cup of tea, sat by the window, and took out her notebook. Carefully, she recorded what she had seen, the time, the description of the man, the new accomplice, and the package. Every detail mattered. She also sketched a rough map of the shop and the surrounding area, marking exits, hiding spots, and possible routes for escape. For the next few hours, Maya watched the movements around the shop. The man in the dark jacket left and returned, sometimes with the same package, sometimes with nothing. She noticed a pattern: he would meet someone at specific times, always in the same way, always cautious but confident. It was clear to her that they were preparing for another robbery or some other illegal activity. Maya realized she had stumbled upon a critical clue, something the police would have dismissed as unimportant if she had tried to tell them. She now had proof that the suspect was not acting alone and that his plans were ongoing. This information was far more significant than anything the police had uncovered so far. The problem was that they still didn't take her seriously. She decided that she needed to gather more evidence before involving the authorities again. This time, she wanted something undeniable, something that could not be ignored or dismissed. Maya spent the next few days observing the shop and the surrounding streets, noting every detail. She recorded the comings and goings of the suspects, the times they met, and the methods they used to avoid detection. During one of her observations, Maya noticed something unusual. A delivery truck arrived at the back of the shop, and a man she hadn't seen before unloaded crates quickly and efficiently. The way he moved suggested experience. This was not an amateur. Maya took careful mental notes, memorizing the sequence of actions, the faces, the timing. She knew that this detail could be the key to predicting the suspect's next move. Meanwhile, the police continued to struggle. They were following leads that led nowhere, checking obvious clues, and relying on standard procedures that were ineffective. Their dismissal of Maya's earlier observations meant that they were missing the most important pieces of the puzzle. Every time she heard their voices laughing at her name, she felt a mix of frustration and determination. They thought she was ordinary, but she was quietly building a case that they couldn't ignore. One evening, as Maya walked home, she noticed the man in the dark jacket following the same pattern she had observed. He moved cautiously, checking his surroundings, and then disappeared into an alley. Maya followed at a safe distance, careful to remain unseen. The alley led to an old warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place that seemed abandoned to most people. Maya felt a thrill of discovery. She had found their hidden location, the place where they were preparing their next crime. She crouched behind a stack of crates, keeping her eyes on the warehouse. Through a cracked window, she could see the suspects moving inside, arranging items, talking quietly, and planning. Maya's heart pounded, but she stayed calm. She knew that she needed more than just observation, she needed evidence that could not be ignored. She memorized every detail, every movement, every face. Over the next few days, Maya continued to watch the warehouse. She noticed that the suspects were testing security measures, checking cameras, and discussing timing. She recorded their schedule, noting the moments when the warehouse was least protected. Every detail brought her closer to understanding their plan and predicting their next move. At the same time, she started thinking about how to present her findings. She knew the police would still mock her if she went to them without undeniable proof. She needed something concrete: photographs, sketches, or perhaps catching the suspects in the act. Maya planned carefully, knowing that one wrong move could alert them and ruin months of observation. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. One night, she noticed that the suspects were preparing to transport something from the warehouse. The timing was perfect, she had memorized their schedule and knew exactly when they would leave. Maya positioned herself in a hidden spot along the route, where she could see and record everything without being noticed. As the suspects emerged, she observed their actions carefully. She noticed the new accomplice she had seen at the shop, carrying the package, and the man in the dark jacket coordinating their movements. Maya quickly sketched the scene in her notebook, making detailed notes of the vehicle, the people involved, and the route they took. She also memorized faces, clothing, and distinguishing features. After they left, Maya followed them at a safe distance, careful to remain unseen. She recorded their stops, the way they transferred items, and the interactions between the accomplices. Every detail added to the growing picture in her mind. By the time she returned home, she had a clear understanding of their plan and the people involved. The next morning, Maya reviewed her notes. She realized that she now had enough information to identify all the key players and predict their next move. She could have gone to the police, but she knew that they might still dismiss her findings. Instead, she decided to prepare a detailed report, complete with sketches, observations, and a clear explanation of the suspects' patterns. She wanted to be ready for the moment when no one could doubt her. Maya also understood the importance of timing. The suspects were careful, but they were not perfect. Everyone makes mistakes, and she had been watching closely enough to spot them. She began planning how to use their own errors against them, how to expose their plan without putting herself or others in danger. It was a delicate balance, but Maya was patient and meticulous. Throughout this time, she continued her ordinary life. At the library, she smiled, helped children, and arranged books as if nothing had changed. But inside, she was focused, determined, and fully aware of the stakes. She knew that the police would never recognize her abilities until it was too late. That thought alone strengthened her resolve. Maya's careful observation soon revealed a small, critical flaw in the suspect's plan. One of the accomplices had a habit of leaving small clues behind: an object slightly out of place, a footprint in the dirt, a forgotten piece of paper. While the police were too busy mocking her to notice, Maya immediately recognized the importance of these details. She carefully documented each one, knowing that together, they would form undeniable proof. By the end of the week, Maya had all the information she needed. She had identified the suspects, understood their patterns, predicted their movements, and discovered the flaw that could lead to their capture. The puzzle was complete in her mind, and the next step was clear: it was time to act. Maya knew that when she revealed what she had discovered, the police would have no choice but to listen. The evidence was too strong, the details too precise, and the connections too clear. She had turned their underestimation of her into an advantage. While they mocked her, she had quietly built a case that could not be ignored. And so, the ordinary librarian, dismissed and ridiculed, was now in a position of quiet power. She had uncovered a critical clue that changed everything. The next phase of the story would test her patience, courage, and intelligence in ways she had never imagined. But Maya was ready. She had proven to herself that appearances could be deceiving, and soon, she would prove it to the world. Maya had been quietly observing the criminals for days, carefully noting every detail, every movement, and every mistake they made. She now had enough information to predict their next move, but she knew that acting too quickly could be dangerous. Patience was her ally, and planning was her weapon. While the police continued to mock her and dismiss her earlier observations, she quietly prepared to take action in a way that would catch the criminals off guard. The first step was to understand the criminals' routine completely. Maya spent hours mapping the town, marking important locations, escape routes, and potential hiding spots. She knew exactly where they would move, when they would leave the warehouse, and how they would transport their stolen items. Every observation was carefully noted in her notebook, which had become a record of her investigation, a detailed guide that would lead to the criminal's capture. One evening, she noticed that the man in the dark jacket and his accomplices were behaving differently. There was tension in their movements, small signs of nervousness. Maya realized that her careful tracking had caused them to adjust their plans, though they didn't know why. This was the perfect opportunity. They were not acting as confidently as before, and one small mistake could expose them completely. Maya decided to follow them at a safe distance that night. She kept to the shadows, using alleys, trees, and parked cars to remain unseen. She memorized their actions, noting the way they communicated with small gestures, how they checked the streets before moving, and how they avoided obvious surveillance. Every detail she recorded brought her closer to understanding how to stop them without risking her safety. After several hours, the criminals reached a familiar location, a deserted warehouse at the edge of town. Maya recognized it immediately as the place where she had first spotted the man in the dark jacket with the mysterious package. From her hiding spot, she could see them entering, moving quickly, and preparing something inside. Her heart raced, but she stayed calm. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Maya realized that waiting for them to make another move outside would be too risky. She needed to gather undeniable evidence, something the police couldn't ignore. She carefully approached a vantage point near the warehouse, hidden behind crates and debris, where she could see everything clearly. Through a small crack in the wall, she observed the criminals arranging items, making plans, and testing their escape route. Every movement was a clue, every action a piece of the puzzle she had been building. Over the next few days, Maya continued her observations. She noticed that the criminals were preparing for a major heist, targeting a new location in the town. They had become more confident, unaware that someone was watching their every move. Maya carefully documented their schedule, the roles of each accomplice, and the methods they intended to use. She also noted the small mistakes they kept repeating, signs of carelessness that would eventually help her stop them. Maya began planning how to use these mistakes to her advantage. She realized that she could expose their plan without directly confronting them, using their own actions against them. She sketched detailed maps, marking the times they would leave, the routes they would take, and the moments when they were most vulnerable. Her strategy was simple: stay hidden, remain patient, and let the criminals reveal themselves through their errors. One afternoon, she noticed a critical mistake. One of the accomplices had left a piece of paper in the warehouse, carelessly discarded. It contained notes about their next target, timings, and methods. Maya quickly memorized the contents, understanding that this was the key to predicting the heist with precision. She carefully hid near the warehouse until the criminals left, ensuring she was not seen, and then returned home to plan the next steps. While the police continued their routine investigations, Maya had everything she needed. She could have gone to them immediately, but she knew that they might still dismiss her findings. Instead, she decided to wait for the perfect moment, one that would leave no room for doubt. Her patience and careful planning meant that when the time came, the criminals would be caught, and the police would have no choice but to acknowledge her intelligence and courage. Maya also realized that she needed to anticipate the criminals' reactions. They were experienced, cautious, and clever. Any sudden movement or confrontation could alert them and ruin the plan. She carefully calculated every step, imagining possible outcomes and preparing for contingencies. Her mind worked like a chessboard, moving pieces in advance, thinking several moves ahead. The day of the anticipated heist arrived. Maya had positioned herself strategically, hidden from view but with a clear line of sight. She observed the criminals moving into position, checking their equipment, and coordinating with each other. Her notes guided her actions, allowing her to predict exactly what they would do next. Every gesture they made confirmed her suspicions, every movement was part of the pattern she had identified. At the critical moment, Maya noticed another small mistake. One of the accomplices failed to secure a door properly, leaving a subtle gap that could be exploited. She memorized the detail immediately, knowing that this tiny flaw could lead to the criminal's capture. Her mind raced as she adjusted her plan, preparing to use this advantage without putting herself in danger. Maya's careful observation paid off. The criminals moved according to the pattern she had predicted, unaware that someone had seen their plan in its entirety. She recorded everything meticulously, from the order in which they entered the building to the way they handled the stolen items. Every detail was evidence, undeniable proof that they could not deny. As the night progressed, Maya realized that she could now take action without directly confronting the criminals. She used her observations to set up a situation where their mistakes would expose them naturally. She left subtle signs along their route, small indicators that would draw attention to their movements, ensuring that when the time came, the authorities would be able to act. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation, still unaware of the full picture. Their dismissive attitude toward Maya had blinded them to the critical clues she had discovered. Little did they know that the quiet librarian they mocked was orchestrating a plan that would lead to the criminal's downfall. Maya remained calm and composed throughout the night. She knew that fear or hesitation could ruin everything. Her careful planning, patient observation, and strategic thinking meant that she was in control of the situation, even if no one else realized it. She had turned the criminals' overconfidence and carelessness into a tool she could use to ensure justice. By the early hours of the morning, Maya had gathered enough evidence to make the criminals' capture inevitable. She had memorized their route, recorded their actions, identified every key player, and noted the critical mistakes that would lead to their exposure. Her careful planning meant that when the time came, the police or anyone acting on her information would be able to stop them without danger to themselves. Maya also reflected on what she had learned during this time. She realized that intelligence, patience, and courage were more powerful than brute force or authority. The police, despite their training, had underestimated the quiet power of observation and careful thinking. Maya had turned their dismissal into an advantage, showing that someone ordinary could achieve extraordinary results through determination and careful planning. As dawn approached, Maya retreated to a safe location, her mind still alert, reviewing every detail of the night. She knew that the next phase would require precise timing, but she also knew that she had prepared as thoroughly as possible. Her notebook was full of observations, maps, and notes, all carefully organized to ensure that nothing was overlooked. The criminals, meanwhile, were unaware that their plan was being unraveled. They moved with confidence, thinking they were clever and cautious, but they had overlooked one important fact: Maya had seen everything. She had anticipated their actions, predicted their mistakes, and quietly prepared for the moment when their plan would collapse. By the time the sun rose, Maya felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had positioned herself perfectly, gathered all necessary evidence, and ensured that the next step would lead to the criminal's exposure. The ordinary librarian, dismissed and mocked, had become a strategist, an observer, and a protector of her town. Her careful planning and courage had brought her to a point where the criminals' mistakes would soon cost them dearly. Maya knew that the coming moments would be decisive. The next phase of her plan would require precision, patience, and courage. She was ready to act, confident that her careful observation, planning, and intelligence would lead to success. The police, who had mocked her, were about to witness the consequences of their mistake. And so, the quiet librarian, underestimated and overlooked, prepared to turn the criminals' own actions against them. Her patience, courage, and careful planning had brought her to the brink of a breakthrough. The town had no idea that an ordinary woman had become the key to stopping a dangerous criminal plan. Maya was ready, and soon, the truth would be revealed. Maya had spent days, even weeks, quietly observing the criminals, gathering evidence, and planning every detail. Now, the moment she had been preparing for had finally arrived. She knew exactly what the suspects would do, how they would move, and the mistakes they would make. She had turned their overconfidence and carelessness into an advantage, and now it was time to ensure that justice was served. That morning, Maya awoke early, careful to remain composed. She had already memorized the sequence of events that the criminals were likely to follow, based on all her previous observations. Her notebook, filled with sketches, notes, and timings, sat on the table beside her. Every detail she had gathered would now be crucial. She reviewed it one last time, making sure nothing was overlooked. Outside, the town was quiet. Most people were just beginning their day, unaware of the danger that had been lurking and the ordinary young woman who had been silently watching. Maya dressed plainly, as usual, to avoid drawing attention. She left her apartment, notebook in hand, and moved toward the area where she had tracked the suspects before. Her heart was steady, her mind alert. She knew that patience and careful planning were key. She could not allow haste to ruin everything. Maya arrived at the observation point she had chosen days before. From there, she could see the criminals moving according to the pattern she had predicted. They were confident, unaware that someone had been tracking them, unaware that each of their movements had been anticipated. Maya noted their positions, the way they carried themselves, and the slight tension in their gestures. Every little detail confirmed her plan. She observed quietly as the suspects prepared to execute their heist. Packages were being moved, doors were checked, and the accomplices coordinated with small signals. Maya had memorized every step, so she could predict exactly what they would do next. Her plan was to let them make their move and then use their own mistakes against them. She would remain hidden, ensuring that they were caught in the act, and that no one, including herself, would be in danger. As the suspects moved toward the street, Maya noticed a small but crucial mistake. One of the accomplices failed to properly lock the back door of the warehouse. It was a simple oversight, but it created an opening that would allow for the perfect intervention. Maya noted it immediately, recognizing that this tiny error would be the key to exposing the entire operation. She remained calm, knowing exactly how to use it to her advantage. Maya had also predicted the route the criminals would take once they left the warehouse. She positioned herself strategically along the street, hidden from view, with a clear line of sight. From there, she could monitor their movements, ensuring that when the time came, she could gather all the evidence needed. She took careful mental notes of the vehicles, faces, and timing, making sure that nothing was missed. As the criminals moved into the street, Maya saw their overconfidence begin to show. They believed they were clever, that no one could track them. But their arrogance had blinded them to the fact that Maya had been observing every step. She recorded everything in her mind and notebook, knowing that each detail would be critical when presenting evidence later. Maya's patience and planning paid off. The criminals began their heist exactly as she had predicted, making the same mistakes she had noticed before. One accomplice left behind a small package on the side of the road, while another failed to check a nearby window, leaving a trace that could link them to the crime. Maya noted every error carefully, knowing that these small oversights would be crucial in ensuring their capture. Meanwhile, the police were still unaware of the true situation. They had continued their routine investigation, missing the larger picture entirely. Maya knew that if she could provide them with undeniable evidence at this moment, the criminals would be caught immediately. She remained hidden, waiting for the perfect opportunity to reveal everything she had discovered. The critical moment arrived when the criminals attempted to transport the stolen items. Maya had memorized every step, including the exact path they would take and the timing of their actions. She moved silently to a location where she could clearly see the transfer, ensuring that she could record every detail. From her vantage point, she could see the entire operation unfold, and every error the criminals made was like a piece of evidence falling into place. One of the accomplices accidentally dropped a small item, which rolled into the street. Maya noticed it immediately, recognizing it as a piece of crucial evidence. She carefully retrieved it without being seen, making sure to preserve it for the authorities. At the same time, she observed the rest of the criminals, noting their reactions to the unexpected incident. Their panic was subtle but telling, confirming that Maya's predictions were accurate. With the evidence in hand and the pattern of the heist fully confirmed, Maya decided it was time to involve the police. She approached the nearest officer, who had been patrolling nearby, and calmly presented her observations. "I have information about the robbery," she said clearly. "I have followed the suspects, noted their actions, and recorded evidence that will lead to their capture." The officer, initially skeptical, was surprised by the clarity and precision of Maya's account. She presented her notebook, the sketches, the notes, and the critical piece of evidence she had retrieved. The details were undeniable, precise, and logical. There was no room for doubt. Maya's careful planning, patience, and intelligence had created a record that even the most skeptical police officer could not ignore. The police quickly mobilized based on Maya's information. They intercepted the criminals along the predicted route, catching them in the act. The overconfidence and mistakes of the suspects, combined with Maya's meticulous observations, ensured that the heist was stopped without any harm to the public. The criminals were arrested, and the stolen items were recovered. When the police realized the full extent of Maya's involvement, they were astonished. The same officers who had mocked her, laughing at the idea that an ordinary librarian could contribute anything meaningful, now had to acknowledge that she had been the key to solving the case. Their previous mockery and underestimation of her intelligence were replaced by respect and admiration. Maya's calm and methodical approach had turned the situation around completely. She had demonstrated that courage, intelligence, and careful observation could achieve what others, relying solely on authority, could not. The town was safe, the criminals were captured, and Maya's efforts were recognized, not with grand fanfare, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had done the right thing. In the aftermath, the townspeople began to see Maya differently. She was no longer just the quiet librarian, she was someone who had used her intelligence, patience, and bravery to protect the community. Children who once waved at her with curiosity now looked at her with awe. Neighbors, shopkeepers, and even the police acknowledged the truth they had previously overlooked: appearances could be deceiving, and extraordinary abilities often hid behind ordinary faces. Maya herself remained humble. She did not seek fame or attention, and she continued her daily routine at the library. But inside, she carried the quiet confidence of someone who had proven herself when it mattered most. She had faced danger without fear, acted with intelligence, and ensured justice was served. The police learned a valuable lesson: underestimating someone based on their appearance could have serious consequences. Maya's careful planning, observation, and courage had turned what they saw as an ordinary woman into the hero of the town. They could no longer dismiss the quiet, unassuming people among them, knowing that even the most ordinary-looking individual could possess extraordinary abilities. In the weeks that followed, the town returned to its usual rhythm, but things were not quite the same. Maya continued her work at the library, smiling, helping children, and organizing books. Yet, she had changed subtly. She carried herself with quiet confidence, aware of the impact she had made and the power of careful thought and determination. The criminals, meanwhile, faced justice, their plans thwarted by someone they had never suspected. The police, humbled by their earlier mockery, now respected Maya's intelligence and bravery. And Maya, though still appearing ordinary to the casual observer, had proven something remarkable: that courage, intelligence, patience, and careful planning could make a difference in ways that no one could ignore. The town would remember the events for years to come, not only for the crime that had threatened them but also for the extraordinary quiet woman who had changed everything. Maya had shown that even someone who seemed ordinary could achieve the extraordinary, and that sometimes, the most powerful actions came from those who worked in silence, observing, planning, and waiting for the right moment. Her story became a quiet legend in the town, a reminder that appearances were often deceiving, that intelligence and courage could come from unexpected places, and that one determined individual could change the course of events when others had failed. Maya, the quiet librarian, had become a symbol of patience, observation, and bravery. And though she never sought recognition, her actions had left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed the results. In the end, Maya's victory was not only about stopping the criminals, it was about proving that careful thinking, determination, and courage could overcome underestimation and mockery. She had turned the mistake of the police into an opportunity to save her town, and in doing so, had demonstrated that true strength often lies in those who appear ordinary, yet possess extraordinary insight and bravery.